let's get into the news.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America, all the ships and clippers at sea. Let's go to press. News.
Folks, the first thing we're going to say in game news is that we're awful podcasters.
No. We're amateur podcasters.
We are so bad at this. Okay, so I guess the first thing to say is there have been a couple Reddit posts that have mentioned our podcast quite liberally, including a very big thread about the best board game podcasts of 2019. Anybody out there listening that opined about that, thank you so much. We didn't.
Thank you.
Didn't mention it. We didn't talk about it. It's just something that came up. There was another one where people were talking about just good podcasts to listen to, and the number of mentions and the fervor of those mentions were humbling to us. It was a really sweet thing that people did. And it meant a lot to us. It really did. And we realized, oh my goodness, we really aren't promoting this.
If you like our podcast, please rate us.
Yeah, we have not once said the thing that every podcast says every time, right? Rate and review us. Rate and review us. Please rate and review us. So we'll say this one time right now. The Christmas gift you could give us would be if everybody would, because we're not going to say this every time, we're not going to remind you, if everybody would rate and review us on wherever you listen to podcasts. Yeah. I believe iTunes is probably the best place to do it. I think it has the largest impact. But if you would rate and review us, that would be great.
Yeah.
To that end, in terms of talking about our inability to promote ourselves or even notice things that are going on, I just discovered that back in September, Joel Eddy, who does Drive-Thru games, one of the big video producers for the board game hobby, he's a celebrity. He's a flat-out celebrity in the game. I love his videos. I love his show. I think his taste is really good, and I've been watching him for years and years and years. Turns out, back in September, he did an episode of Drive-Thru FM, a video episode, where he talks for several minutes about how much he likes the Game Brain podcast. Not only that, but the whole episode, he basically says, I'm taking their episode that they did on Game Brain, and I'm going to do it with my own answers because I thought it was such a compelling topic, and I thought it was so interesting. The episode was our round 2, turn 2. It was Dimitri coming up with his top 10 questions new gamers ask. Exactly. And so Joel Eddy does his own version of that. Joel says that he listens to the podcast. Joel, if you're listening, we had no idea you did that. Thank you so much. I'm sure that we got listeners based on your plug, and we really do appreciate that. I loved your episode. I have to say, Joel, I thought it was really, really great. I thought your responses to the top 10 questions for new gamers was a wonderful addition. Wish you had been on our podcast when we did it as well. I think that would have been a really great addition. If you want to hear that, it was from months ago. I don't know why you would, but if you did, you're looking for Drive-Thru FM number 27. You can find it on The Geek. You can find it on YouTube. I recommend Joel Eddy to everybody. He's just a fantastic guy, and I think his taste is pretty darn great. Next, I think all the news that we're going to be talking about is pretty fitting. It's all things that are going to be coming in 2020. We're going to sort of give you a little glimpse of things to come in 2020 and let you know what we think of them. Gale Force 9. Gale Force 9 is a publisher that we do not talk about. We have only talked about them once, and it's because they did a reprint of Dune last year. A reprint that we quite like, but did not love. But we love the game. We thought that the reprint itself was pretty basic, but welcome. Turns out they're doing an expansion for Dune, Ixians and the Tleilaxu. So the Ixians were the technology people in the Dune universe. They made stone burners, they made tanks and all sorts of advanced technology. A lot of the heavy technology was what the Ixians would do. And the Tleilax, you see them in the base game because when people die, their pieces go into the Tleilax tanks.
Get cloned.
They basically get cloned and come back. Golas are created by Tleilox. The face dancers are Tleilox. They're very interesting, sort of, I guess you would say, biological technologists.
They're like the faceless men in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In the lore, they're fascinating.
Sure.
In the lore, they're absolutely fascinating. I wonder how this will be. I wonder this for a very particular reason. Gale Force 9 didn't change things with Dune, right? They took the Dune license, they reprinted the game. My main two criticisms were they took somebody's fan art, which was great.
Sure.
And they printed it and shipped it out. They didn't change it, they didn't improve it, they didn't adjust it. They just printed it and put it out. They took the rules and they printed them and shipped it out. They didn't really, they didn't make,
absolutely.
They didn't tweak, they didn't make nuances. So the problem is that
potential problem, not necessarily a problem.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I like
concern.
A serious concern, is that there were a grand total of 4 expansions to the original Dune. There was the Duel. There was the Spice War.
Yep.
Which you gave me both of those as a gift. The originals of that. They're not good,
but they're historic.
You would never play with them. No. They're. I appreciate it very much. It's as a collector sort of thing. It's great. I would never play it, but I'm really glad to have those and unpunched and everything. It's amazing, but they weren't good. Then, in addition to that, there were these mini expansions that were. One of them was printed in the General, which was a board gaming magazine, sort of a war gaming, board gaming magazine back in the day. And the other was printed in, I think it was in another magazine, I'm not sure. And that's where the Tleilox and the Ixians factions came from. Essentially, somebody decided to write an article where they propose a 7th player for Dune.
Gotcha. I did not know that.
Yes, and that was the Tleilox. Tried it once, it wasn't good. They spent a lot of time not doing anything. They were hard. They didn't really fit. Dune has powers that are so radically different than each other, right? Game-breaking powers in their own way. And the game works because somehow they all have found a balance point to some degree. Now, to some degree, you create the balance point by ganging up on the strong and ignoring the weak and so on and so forth. But there is a lot of that going on. I will say that there have been a couple attempts, a couple versions of what a Tleilax power would be. There was the General, and then people did adjustments afterwards and came up with different ideas. For Gale Force 9, who so far has not put a lot of design work and time into creating these things, I wonder what this expansion is going to be. Are they going to cut and paste like they have in the past? Or are they going to try and design something
to add value,
that is going to truly add value and to be balanced and to come in and be playable and balanced and work? I have a concern. I have a concern whether or not that'll be the case.
Like for me, I think that balance is not a concern for me. Just because if you're playing Dune, you're playing for the IP. You're not playing for the mechanics, or you're playing for the fun of it, and it's the narrative storytelling. It's not something that I normally go for as far as let's create this story. But I think for the most part, if you've bought Dune and you're going to go play Dune, you're going there to quote the book, quote the movie. That's what you're doing.
I'm doing all of that, but I'm also playing in Dune tournaments, so I'm playing for the win too. And if there's a faction that can't win,
almost all the time, the lowest rating win rate is probably the Bene Gesserit, and that's a hard win.
Fremen actually is the lowest. Fremen is the lowest, and the second lowest is Bene Gesserit. Yeah.
And Fremen is rough. I get stuck with Fremen a lot, and I go it's rough. It's the Ryu of it's just very plain. But if you were to add people who were different, and even if they were at that rough level, I mean, you'd have to say that they were so bad that Fremen was looking good to them. And I don't know. I've never played these things, so
I will say this: the one time I played the Tleilax, it wasn't so much that they were bad; it's that they were a little boring. It's that they weren't a very interesting power. There was the things that they didn't intersect with the way the game went very well at all. And having played this game a ton. I could look back at various other plays and said, if I had played them in this scenario, would it have been different? And the answer was, I don't think it would have been that different.
My concern would be basically if the powers were not thematic. The one thing that I can say for Dune is every faction's power is thematic to the, and I don't know what cloning or tech would do to the ecosystem of that balance, but. I'm more optimistic. Good, but I don't have the experience you do. Sure. I haven't seen them play this. So
look, we're not going to do it. Yeah, we're not going to try it.
Exactly.
Right. We're going to try it. We will give you the scoop on it. I'm just saying, buyer beware. I personally wouldn't pre-order it. I wouldn't jump in and be the first person to get that.
Because Matt will.
God bless Matt. God bless Matt. I look up at Mars sometimes and I wonder what he's thinking and what he's doing. That's right. I go into the phone booth and I call him up.
That's right, like Dr. Robinson.
Dr. Robinson, are you even listening right now? I really need your help. I need you to buy the Ixion and Tlaylox expansion to Dune because I'm scared that it won't be good. All right, next up, we are going to talk about another expansion for Teotihuacan.
Yep, one of Dimitri's favorite.
It is interesting, right? That of the games that Daniel Tascini has been involved with, you think of Zolkin, and you think about Lorenzo, and all of these different games that this group of designers have designed. Teotihuacan seems to be the one that they're actively really servicing in terms of expansions. They had one last year, late pre-classical period, and now they have a new one coming out in 2020, Shadow of Xitl, Xitle. Xitl is the volcano that is right next to Mexico City.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
And it erupted back when Teotihuacan was the power of the region, and it disrupted everything. There are huge lava fields that are just outside of Mexico City. It is an interesting volcano in that it only erupted once in history. There's the one time, which, boy, think about that. That's so dangerous, right? You're
overdue.
The lives of all your ancestors, everyone who has lived in this period ever. They have always seen smoke come out of that, but nothing has ever happened. And then all of a sudden, one day, everything gets destroyed. That's kind of amazing, and changed the climate and changed all sorts of situations, and really caused problems for Teotihuacan. So, what Teotihuacan Shadow of Xitl is going to add is 10 new technologies and 10 new starting tiles to the game. I would say those were some of my favorite things in the last expansion. I thought that they really added to the game. They added to the complexity. They added to the variety of the game. What did you think of the late
I think they're fine. Like, I'm probably the one who is in our group who's probably the most apathetic towards the game. Not because it's bad or anything. It's just like it doesn't hit the things that I like in the game. Mm-hmm. So like with the expansion, I go like, okay, well, it's more of the same, and it's at the same level of goodness. I feel like if you're continually adding just new powers or then it's almost like a supplement than an expansion. Does that make sense? Like,
it does feel like a small expansion. I will say I will agree with that. I think it's more of a mini expansion than anything else. But listen, it's going to be compatible with solitaire play,
mm-hmm.
Maddie, you're gonna be able to play it.
That's right.
And I think listen, I wondered when we played it at first whether or not it would have legs. Mm-hmm. Right? I wondered if it would vary. And then the more I played it, I was like, it kind of does, because the what location does what changes in every game. But when the expansion came out, I was like, oh, wow, it has a lot more replayability. Sure. I thought that really, really added a lot to it. And Shadow of Xitl, I'm looking forward to it. This is a game that I want expansions for. This is a game that I'm really looking forward to seeing more of.
Like, when I look for an expansion, like the things that I really enjoy is when it makes me rethink of how to play the game.
Yes.
And I will, do you the stroke of like Tribune does that. Although, I think it's a great game. Blah blah blah. I don't love it as much as you, but it forces you to rethink how you play the game, and I like when expansions do that. I'm not the biggest fan when expansions just go like, oh, here's the same but different. Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about with the expansion. But that's just my own baggage.
I mean, the best expansions do. They reinvent the game, and that's kind of the way I felt about late pre-classical period. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with that one today, but I am. I thought that really reinvented the game a little bit in terms of the way that the game was able to play. But not everyone does. Let's move on to Sleeping Gods. Sleeping Gods is going to come out in 2020. It's the next Ryan Laukat game. Ryan Laukat did Far and Away. He did Near and Far, Above and Below.
All games I've never played.
Some of them are titles. Some of them are not. I don't think Far and Away is one of his titles. I think Near and Far is the game. I'm not even sure if that's correct, but it is. He does these games. He does these interesting games that are medium to light Euro games that have a story aspect. They have a storybook that when you do an action, you turn to that page and you have a mini choose your own adventure where you have to decide whether or not you're going to go for A reward or B reward and risk this or risk that. They're good. I liked it. It's not exactly my cup of tea, but boy, oh boy, it's a very good design. It's totally solid. Sleeping Gods is going to be a little bit different. You and 3 friends become Captain Sophie Odessa and her crew, and you're lost in 1929 on the steamship the Manticore. You are looking for totems from old gods. So yes, Cthulhu seems to be exactly what it is. This one's a campaign game. All right, so which is a little bit different than Above and Below and the other games of his, which were more games you could continue to some degree, but were largely standalone adventures set in the same world. They would continue the same story overall, but not really a campaign game. So in this one, you're going to mark progress on a journey log. You're going to be able to return to that same place, and you're going to be able to keep on going. There are 14 totems hidden in the world that you're going to try and find. So there's an atlas, and the atlas is going to expand as you play. It sounds pretty good.
It sounds pretty good. The only reason why I'm going I hope someone gets it so we play it, it's because of this. There's artwork here, and the guy looks like Steven Seagal.
Yes. By the way, his name is Casey Ryback.
Yeah, and I was going do
you know who that name is?
I don't know.
Casey Ryback is Steven Seagal's character from Under Siege.
So this is purposeful.
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go. I was like, oh well. Anyone who puts Steven Seagal in a board game, they deserve at least a try.
In 1929, in a Cthulhu-themed game.
Exactly.
Oh my God, I don't know how I feel about that at all. But I will say that Ryan has a good track record as a designer, and this seems to be I would say that most of his games were similar to each other. They were interesting, but they none of them really broke out and tried something very different. This one seems a little more different than most of his stuff, and given his propensity for games that have a strong gameplay element and at the same time have a interesting story element that they're adding and trying to combine those two, he's doing something interesting, and this seems to be a natural progression of that and might be better than a lot of story games are because he's looking at it in a different way. Oh, we'll see. Next, we have Ankh, Gods of Egypt. This is the 2020 game from Eric Lang. Miniatures. Right. Miniatures. Tom, miniatures. You do the math. That said, these may be the most beautiful miniatures.
Oh my God! I was thinking that too.
Seen.
I was looking at this and going, "Wow, this is something that you could not have gotten 2 decades ago. This is
this is miniature porn. This is really
exactly
crazy, gorgeous sculpts that are in this thing. They are astonishing. You know what? It may be that I have a anti-fantasy setting thing going on in the back of my brain, like a sort of a semi-conscious to unconscious bias.
Sure.
But when I see dragons and dwarves and that sort of stuff, it tends to turn me cold a little faster than other things. Maybe just because there's such a proliferation of that particular genre, and I feel it's overused. But seeing this, which is the gods of ancient Egypt, the mystical creatures and the pharaohs and the this and that and the other thing, in a really interesting way. Gosh, it feels like that, but it feels fresh and new and fascinating.
The way that I would describe it is like the miniatures are cinematic.
Yes.
They are. You're like going, oh, I could see the movie, like, with this.
Go to the Board Game Geek page, people. Gods of Egypt. And take a look at the pictures. It's amazing. If you were a mini gamer, I do not know how you are not going to get this day and date, right? Yep. The moment it comes out, you're gonna jump on this. Eric Lang is a good designer. I mean, Blood Rage is a good game. Rising Sun is a good game. So you know that the gameplay is probably going to match the level of care and design that these miniatures have been. I gotta tell you, I thought I was immune to miniatures. I thought it's a mini game. No, but skip. I found myself staring at these things.
It's amazing. Like, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be spending a lot of hours like tricking these miniatures out, and it's going to be beautiful. There'll be contests as to see who has tricked out the best miniature.
A friend of mine, Alyssa Fadden, is a famous miniature painter and all that sort of stuff. She's actually a fantasy game cartographer. She gets paid to design these stunning maps of various role-playing settings and stuff like that. She gets paid pretty well to do that and to do miniatures and things like that. The things that she could do with this set, I shudder to think at what would be possible. But hey, if Eric Lang is your jam, this looks incredible. I like the theme. I like Egypt. I would love to see more games that are set in ancient Egypt. I think that's sure. For me that's a period that I'm kind of more interested in than many. Moving on, Architects of the West Kingdom. We just talked about it. Yep. We just played it the other day. It is an expansion that is coming out, Age of Artisans, coming out in 2020. It is available for pre-order right now, but we're going to tell you to hold off on that because I'm going to talk to you more about that in a second. So what this is a expansion to Architects of the West Kingdom. It includes an extra player, so you can play with more players. There are new craft cards, and there is a new guild hall board that is going to add new actions and things to be able to play. 2 new player boards, a variety of new apprentices and buildings. Seems like more of the same in what we were just talking about in terms of huge expansion and smaller expansion. This seems like an expansion that allows the game to play up to 6 players. It seems to add some variety to it, but it doesn't seem to change the game in a huge way. So let's say why you might not want to pre-order it right now. You might not want to pre-order right now because it won't be coming out until probably the summer or at least the late spring. And I have it on good authority that in the middle of March, around March 19th or so, they are going to be kickstarting their new game in this series. So you know that there are Raiders of the North Sea, Architects of the West Kingdom, Paladins, and all so forth. The next game in the series will be coming out then. That's when they're going to kickstart it. And as an add-on, you will be able to purchase this game as an add-on to that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
To be able to put it into that. So if you're not really interested in getting the new one and you would just want to get this, then do that. It might end up being more economical to wait until March and sign on. Because I don't think if you pre-order it now, you're going to be getting it sooner than that. I'm not positive about that. But I do think so. I think it's a good game. I think it's a good game system. I like the games that are turning out, even though the last one fell flat for me personally. Next up, artificial intelligence. Almost nothing to say about this one except that Who's Your Game puts out 1 game a year, and we like them very much. I mean, most of the games that they've put out have been exceptional. Our favorite of which is Madeira. It's an amazing game. Paulo Soledad, Nuno Bizarro Sentiero are the two designers of this year's one, and it's called Artificial Intelligence. We know very little about it. All we can say is that the year is 2090, and the world has witnessed the biggest event in human history. The technological singularity has come to us.
Skynet.
Human labor is going to become obsolete. Automation and machine learning are the new reality, and so on and so forth. We are going to be playing corporations that are pushing boundaries, ignoring old rules, and trying to control this new AI. It is a hand management game. It's going to have stocks and things like that, so it should have a fairly strong economic engine to the game. This is pushing all my buttons. I don't know anything about this game except that I know these designers, I know this publisher, and boy, am I looking forward to this.
We should have like a neo-noir game day where we play all these games that take place in the near future.
So New Angeles and Netrunner.
Exactly. Like Pax Transhumanity would be
yes.
This would be like, just one thematic day. And then like we all end up with like, with like a Mad Max
or Shadowrun.
Exactly. we end it with a Pakatom.
A Pakatom. That was a good game. Yeah, I don't know what more to say about that except that whenever the new Who's Your Game comes out, I have to tell everybody about it because they have a great track record. And I believe last on our news for today is a game that is probably coming out in 2020, Imperial Struggle. Imperial Struggle is the next game by Ananda Gupta and Jason Matthews. If you know those names, it's because they are the designers of one of our favorite games of all time, Twilight Struggle. This is going to be a game in the Twilight Struggle universe. It's going to be using similar mechanics, but maybe a little streamlined. It takes place at the end of the 17th century, right around 1700. The Sun King Louis XIV has ended a decade of war on the continent, and now the war is going to extend to the colonies. It's sort of the first Cold War, the 100-year shadow war that happened between France and England in the battles for the Americas, in the French and Indian War, in the American Revolution, and so on and so forth on down the line. Looks very interesting. Looks very, very good, kind of deep and meaty. This is put out by GMT Games. Let me talk about GMT Games a minute because we got some things to say. GMT Games makes war games and heavy Euro games. They've made games that we have mentioned on the show. We mentioned Here I Stand on the show. We mentioned Paths of Glory. Fire in the Lake is a coin game that we play a lot. Cuba Libre, Churchill, Barbarossa to Berlin. They made 1846. They made a fantastic, very well put together 18XX title that had better components than most 18XX titles. They have a brand new one, which is 1862, which I'm going to be talking about in Games on the Brain. And of course, they also put out Twilight Struggle. They have an interesting business model. They have something called the P500, which is a pre-order system. They put up information about a game that their designers and that they've bought or they're interested in, and they don't do anything with that except have these designers keep designing the game as people put in pre-orders. And once that pre-order gets to 500 or more, it dings a bell, and all of a sudden they get to move to the next stage. They're like, okay, we can start putting some money in behind this, and now we're going to do some artwork and start to develop that. And as those pre-orders get higher, get to certain levels, they hit a level where they say, okay, this game is good to go financially. It makes sense for us to make this game, and they make the game. This game has been, I think it has over 3,000 pre-orders, and it has had those 3,000 pre-orders for a while, which means these designers are working on it. They are working on it. My understanding is that the art is being done. I saw some proofs of it. It looks good. Hopefully, they will be ready to ship this game this summer. If I had to guess, I would say I think this summer it'll be ready. I think they're probably going to, for sure, try and have it before Essen. So, listen, the designers of Twilight Struggle doing another Twilight Struggle game in a different historical period, I don't need anything more than that. What do you have you played Twilight Struggle?
Of course I have.
Of course you have.
But I'm not like you and Jesse. Like you and Jesse love Twilight Struggle.
Yeah, it's true.
Like for me, Twilight Struggle is one of those games where you have to study to play right. And I'm just not willing to put in the effort to study. It's well worth it. I can see its brilliance. It is simply a matter of effort to reward.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that much effort to get. It's some, that's for sure.
For example, there are opening plays that you should probably do. You should know all the cards because you're going to have to deal with them. And
card knowledge is a big deal, that's for sure. Yes,
and so like once you have that base knowledge, then you get to really play the game. And I think that's fine. I think that's fine especially for a 2-player game.
Yeah,
where it is a little like a version of chess. Like I was more interested in Labyrinth. Like that's more asymmetric, and I like that idea of that more. I would have been more willing to learn that just because I like asymmetry in that way.
Labyrinth is another GMT design.
Yeah. Whereas it followed Twilight, right? It was
correct.
Yeah. So I'm curious how they'll do this. I wonder if it'll just be Twilight Struggle in the past, or if it'll be some new mechanic that would be interesting.
It looks like they're doing some different things with it. It looks like they're adding new mechanisms and simplifying some other things. So I can't wait.
And he's pushing everyone now so that it gets to the next level.